Okay, good morning, JAWS. It is so exciting to see all of you here for our event today. Before I get officially started into the full presentation, I would like to bring out a very special guest who's hiding behind the scenes. Where's our special guest? Where's our special guest? I heard we're having a special guest. The special guest has been located.
JAWSDAYS イベント開催おめでとうございます。今日は1200人近くでキャンセル待ちの方が数百人だと思いますが、1000名イベントの準備と企画の大変さっていうのは我々もう大変な知っているわけです。なので実行委員会の方々にまずお礼を言いたい。準備、あと当日の上でものすごく大変だと思います。ありがとうございます。B2B4、今年のテーマ、都市と地方です。学生と社会人です。多様性がリアルで集まって日本にイノベーションを起こそう。私、このテーマを私は素晴らしいなと思います。イノベーションって多様性がものすごく必要だ。固定観念から受け入れて違う価値観を持ってた人たちが集まってこそイノベーション。AWS ってそうやってもらうんですよ。AWS が日本でそこまで成長できたっていうのは、その多様性があったからこそ、今のモデルです。ありがとうございます。で、私ですね、先般、AWS の代表を退任するという発表をしました。いろんな方を驚かせた結果になりました12年と7ヶ月、私、IT の民主化というものを信じて駆け抜けてまだまだ道半ばです。私、チームにもミッションとして、あらゆる日本全国、あらゆる企業規模の皆様、イノベーションを AWS で実現する。これをですね、本当に口酸っぱくして、AWS のスタッフにやってまいりました。まだまだ道半ばです。ただ私がジョインした2011年と今の景色を見ると全然違います。2011年私9月から10月に初めてJAWSDAYSのイベントに参加いたしました。確かフリソフトさんの秋山のですね、小さなオフィスです。当時はですね、おそらく30名か50名ぐらいだったと思います。で、ちょうどアダム・セレプスキーですね、今の CEO が日本に来日してまして、一緒にそこで挨拶させてもらって。当時、マーケの小島さん、エヴァンジェリスト、まだ当時エヴァンジェリストだった浜田、この2人が牽引して、日本の AWS も当時は本当にもう、両手の人数ぐらいで、もう全員、上手にそれから考えるとですね、本当にJAWSDAYSはこのような形で開催されて、これ開催されてるっていうのは、おそらくですね、JAWSDAYSに関わっていただいた過去の方々がバトンをきちりとつないできたその証だと思います。私は皆さんに対してお礼を言いたいと思いますし、そのバトンをつないできた過去にJAWSDAYSに携わってきた皆様にも言葉を書いてお礼を言いたいと思って、今日時間ジェフ・バーン非常に貴重なキーノートの時間を一つだけいただいて、皆さんにちょっとお答えさせたいと思って。ただですね、日本はものすごい可能性があります。例えばアジアだとか、あるいはアメリカと比べると、イノベーションのスピードってまだまだ遅いです。先ほど私が言ったミッションのまだ道半ばというふうに言いましたが、日本にはこのJAWSDAYS、世界に例を見る素晴らしいコミュニティ、 皆様の熱量、パッション、あと思い、これが一つになることで、さらに盛んにこの日本の皆さんを導けるんじゃないかというふうに思います。私が退任してもですね、今まで日本には非常に孤立をしてきました。あらゆるエリアで投資をしてきました。これからも日本という国は AWS にとって最も重要な国の一つであることに変わりない。そこはもう安心しています。ですので私の願いとしては、皆様がこのバトンをですね、将来に向かってつないで、日本の全国各地でさまざまなイノベーションがですね、あらゆるところで生まれることを私は今度は違う立場でそうしたいというふうに思っています。そして何よりもですね、皆さんですね、プロデュースに関わる皆様が一人一人を将来ヒーローとして輝くことを私は祈っています。
10時20分後でお願いできればと思います。
皆さん、JAWSDAYS をぜひ5年ぶりの開催です。楽しんでください。
That was very inspirational to hear, and we recognize all of your wonderful contributions to the success of AWS and JAWS. Before you go, I do have something a little bit special for you. I was going through my collection of classic AWS stickers, and I found some AWS stickers from the very, very early days. I found the original S3 sticker, and I also have for you an original. Let me dig this out here. I have an original EC2 sticker as well somewhere. Here we go, EC2. I know that in Japan you have a lot of respect and reverence for history. These are 15-year-old stickers, and these are for you. Just a little. All right, that was a wonderful way to get started. As always, I am so. What did you change? Oh, yes, okay. You good? All right. It's always best if you have your presentation visible on the screen. Okay, so that. There's my presentation. The JAWS committee was very kind and asked me to speak on several different topics. One of the things they said was give the audience a personal sense of who is Jeff and what do you do and what are you all about. So I'm going to do that. I want to make sure that I learn a little bit from you as well. So I'm going to ask you all a few questions a little later, and you'll be able to raise your hand if you'd like. I definitely want to talk about all of my wonderful history with JAWS, and then I really want to focus on the main topic, was really the value and the power of community. I've consulted with my colleagues all around the world to get some great examples of how other communities are innovating, and they thought it would be really worthwhile for me to share them with you. And then I'll close with a few thoughts about the past and the future of JAWS. Okay, so some of you have probably seen me speak before. I'm Jeff Barr. I have been at Amazon for almost 22 years. I started at the very, very beginning when we first started publishing web services, and quickly found my role as an evangelist. And personally, I have a lot of other things happening in my life simply besides my job. I love to make things. For example, I love to make things with Lego and 3D printing and electronics, and even with paper and with cardboard. I've been working in tech since the 1970s. My first job in tech, I was 16 years old working at a computer store in Seattle. I have a big family. I have 5 grown children. I have 6 grandchildren. But you probably know me as the VP and Chief Evangelist for AWS. Now, I put a little bit of a lesson on this slide. It's a lesson that I've been trying to share widely. I put my job and my title at the end. And I do that very specifically because I've found that in our life and in our career, it's a little too easy to simply define yourself by your job and by your title. And you can sometimes let that kind of walk ahead of you a little bit and open doors for you, which is fine. But your job and your title, they might change throughout your life. But these other things, who you are, what you like to do, your family, those are longer term. And it's very important to also think of yourself in those kinds of terms. And I've only come to realize this in the last few years. But as a simple lesson to you, do not simply define yourself by your title and by your job. Be a little bit more expansive in how you define yourself. A little bit of background. I earned a degree in computer science many years ago. I've been coming to Japan since the early 1990s. One of the companies that I worked for at the time, we had a very small customer base here, and I was always happy to come. I will tell you, but back then, there were no maps, there were no translators. I can't even remember how I managed to find my way around from place to place as I was coming to Japan, but somehow I did. And now it's a lot easier to do with our mobile devices. But I've always enjoyed coming here. I've enjoyed the people. I've enjoyed the culture as well. In 2010, I thought it was time to kind of re-energize my skills a little bit. And while working, I also went back to school and earned a degree in communications and digital media. In my career, I've worked at a number of different places. I've worked at some startups. I've done various kinds of consulting. I spent 3 years at Microsoft on the Visual Studio team. And then I joined Amazon in 2002 at the very start of our work to build and to share web services with developers. And that's where I came on board. So what do I do in my job? As an evangelist, it's a fun and unique job title. These are some of the things that I like to do and to practice. I spend a lot of time learning. I use all of the different new AWS services. When I am speaking, when I'm writing, I always like to do that from personal experience. So that means if I'm writing a blog post about a new service, I will always have used that service personally. I also spend a lot of time connecting with people. You can find me on many different social media sites. I'm messaging back and forth with people live and on social media. I like to get that sense of who the audience is, what I'm doing that is working, what's not working, and get that connection, get that feedback, which is the next step. Is while most people would think of the job as an evangelist that we're mostly speaking, that's just part of the job. A lot of the actual job is listening to the community, listening to our customers, getting ideas, getting suggestions, getting feedback, all of which I do my best to capture and document if it might be ideas for a new AWS service, for example, I will send that feedback directly to the team. I spend a lot of time creating content. I create blog posts. You might know I've been writing the AWS news blog since 2004. So coming up on 20 years on that blog. In that time, I've written 3,300 and something number of blog posts. So lots and lots of creation. I record videos. I've been participating in the AWS on air live streams. And the whole model I have is that as I am learning, as I'm listening, I'm getting a sense of the audience, getting a sense of the best ways to create content and share it, all with the goal of educating and letting you, my audiences worldwide, have a better understanding of the different kinds of services that we have, what they are, what are the features, but really to inspire you to think, how can I use these services to create a new business, solve a problem, do something now in a better way. So I'm always thinking with my talks, how can my audience walk away with that inspiration, with that thought of, I can do something new that I could not do before. Now, one thing that I don't pay much attention to, I do not pay very much attention at all to our sales or our popularity or our numbers. I focus on all of these activities, knowing that sales and success is going to come as a result of doing these particular jobs as well as I possibly can. Okay, my first question for you. How many of you were around in 1960? 1960. All right. All right, excellent, excellent. Hi there. Okay. Okay, I almost thought I was the oldest person in the room, but I guess I'm not. Good to see you, as always. Always good to see you. This was a wonderful time to be born. This was a time of a lot of optimism. In the United States, there was a lot of excitement about technology. There was excitement about the space program. By the time I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, I was already deep into technology. I understood the basics of electricity and of rockets, and I knew that was going to be my future. Okay, how about 1975? Okay, we're what, 2? Okay, let's say less than 10. Okay, you're making me feel very old here tonight. Okay. Okay, 1975 was a truly amazing year. In 1975, this magazine was published, Popular Electronics magazine, and it promised the world's first mini computer kit. This was the very famous Altair computer. People saw this and they said, this is an absolute revolution. This is 1/100th of the price of previous mini computers. This is going to change the world. Among people who saw this, of course, were Bill Gates and Paul Allen, who said, we're going to start writing software for this computer. We're going to form Microsoft. We all saw how well that went. Okay? I saw this, and before I knew it, I had a job at a little computer store in Seattle that was actually selling the Altair and many other of these early personal computers. Okay, now let me give you a little sense of my history with JAWS. Back around 2010, I think was one of the first times I came here on behalf of AWS. I'd been here several times before on behalf of our earlier web services, but Ojima-san, who was our original marketing manager, he invited me, and he said, we are going to form this brand new user group. We're going to call it JAWS UG, and we are going, he asked me if I could be one of the first speakers. Was anybody here at that first meeting? Anybody? Okay, wow, that's actually really interesting. So, oh, okay. One person. Great. I was there, and the interesting thing about user groups is that if you're kind of a business executive sometimes, you don't always fully understand the value and the power of these user groups, because they often attract, at first, kind of a small audience. But what I know, the user groups attract the right audience. People come to user groups because they simply want to listen and learn and connect. It doesn't matter how many people show up. What matters is that the right people show up. And today, all of you are the right people, and you've all shown up. So give yourselves a hand for doing that. It's so important. Over the years, I've spoken at many different JAWS events. I've both many in person and several online during the pandemic. Number of different topics over the years. And I will tell you that I've met with user groups all over the world. But when I'm talking to other user groups and they say, what is an example of a success that you can share with us? My thinking always comes back to this group, to you, all of you amazing JAWS UG members right here. I think of all the times that I've met you, that you have been so warm and friendly and accommodating, made sure that I had just the best possible time here in my time in Tokyo. Really appreciate that. Okay, let's go back again to 1975, 1976, and that first user group. Okay, this computer's announced, this Altair 8800. By today's standards, it's a very simple computer. It has the Intel 8080 processor chip, and it's got simply 256 bytes of memory. Not gigabytes, not megabytes, not kilobytes, simply 256 bytes. In that little bit of memory, you could write your own machine language programs. You would start by writing them on a piece of paper, and you would just compute all the addresses and the instructions by hand. You'd enter in those instructions on the front panel. But that was the way many people got their first introduction to computers. At that time, it cost $439 in the US, which I went and did some conversion to the Japanese yen of the time. It was 131,700 yen. So fairly expensive, but people said, this is my route to the future. And when we look back into history, this turns out to be the first commercially successful personal computer. People were so excited about this brand new computer, even if they didn't own one, if they didn't have the money. I should mention, this was not something that you purchased and it showed up ready to use. You purchased this and it shows up as a box full of parts. You had to be fairly good with electronics, with tools, with a soldering iron to put all of this together with the hope that it would actually work once you did that. So there was a lot of work to get to the starting point. So this computer is launched, and the world looks and says, this is a revolution. A quote I got from the magazine: "The era of the computer in every home, a favorite topic among science fiction writers, has arrived." So this is kind of the AWS equivalent of when we launched EC2 and S3 back in 2006. This was one of those starting points. People look at this, they get very excited, and they want to connect and communicate. They want to learn. and communities begin to form. This particular picture is a very important part of this story. This is a place in Seattle called the Pacific Science Center, and this building still exists. It's actually very, very close to where I live now. And the Pacific Science Center was home to one of the first computer clubs, kind of the alter equivalent of JAWS UG, you could think of it. This was called the Northwest Computer Club, and we started up meeting in somebody's house, and before we knew it, we got meeting space at the Pacific Science Center. We started writing and publishing a newsletter. Now, remember, this is long before the days of email and word processors and the internet. So all of this is really being done by hand. At this point, I am about 16, 17 years old. But the important thing, and the message I want to give you today about this kind of user group, my age, my background, my lack of skills, none of that made a difference. This was a club that people would go to because they cared about personal computers, and everyone was welcome. And it makes me think of what the kind of group that we have right here today. Everyone is here. Everyone is welcome. Something I find fascinating about user group communities. People come to a community like this voluntarily. Did anybody's manager at your job, did they say, you must go to JAWS UG on Saturday? Anybody? No. Perfect. People come here because your desire, your passion is to be here. You're in a beautiful city. You have your choice of 1,000 things you could do, but you decided that this was the best thing to do today. And I think that is very, very meaningful. That is so meaningful and so significant. You come here for whatever your purpose might be, to listen, to learn, to connect, but you're here. That's the important part. You fully have the opportunity to participate. You can talk, you can discuss, but if you're the person who's a little bit quiet and you'd prefer to be off in the corner and be a little bit shy and quiet, that was me when I was young. I was that young, quiet person. If you want to be quiet, that's fine too. The important aspect of these communities is that you're all welcome, and whatever you bring to it, that's going to increase the value of the community. All right. Now I want to talk to you about some of the innovations that we have seen in other parts of the AWS community. And all of these innovations were supplied to me by my colleagues. And as you can see, each of these is coming from a different part of the world. We're going to visit Vietnam, Nepal, Korea. We're going to talk about 2 different success stories in Japan, and then we'll talk about a global success story as well. Okay, let's start in Vietnam. Okay, so the leaders of the AWS user group in Vietnam, they are in a very diverse part of the world. They read and speak in a lot of different languages, but they found that as they were bringing new developers, that those developers really wanted localized content. They saw that there were a lot of different ways that developers could choose to learn. They had different learning journeys, but they also saw that there was not a lot of AWS content in the Vietnamese language. So that was their challenge. And what this user group did, they started a study group organized on Facebook. Now, this was purely a community initiative. This was not something that AWS suggested that they do or sponsored in any way. This was purely the community there deciding to do this. And what they have created, they created a repository of local materials, all translated into their local languages. And they call this the First Cloud Journey. And this is an online resource. It's available for individuals, for universities, and for companies. It's a website, you can find it. And this is a great example of the power of a community working together. They see a problem that maybe can't be solved by AWS or by one person, but this community said, if we all work together, we can build a very, very rich collection of content, and we can help to get new members educated and up to speed. So that's the First Cloud Journey. Now, I did some interesting calculations as an example of how big might a study group get. And realizing that every user group is a little bit different, every culture might be a little bit different, but their study group on Facebook has about 32,000 members. That's out of a population in Vietnam of 95 million. Okay? Now in Japan, you have a population of 125 million. This means you could make a study group of 42,000 people if you were able to run at the same level of intensity that they do. So if you were to want to do something like this, I think the opportunity is there to create a very large-scale study group and continue this creation of locally created content. Great start. So as you can see, there's a lot of the introductory content, and I do think it's very important when you start to think about content. It's very easy to think, let's pick the most complex topics and the newest services, and let's write about those. You know, if we've been using AWS for a while, we all know that those are the most interesting ones for us as the experienced users. However, any kind of a healthy community, the newer users, the inexperienced users, the people just getting started, they need all of this very straightforward content. Things like, how do I create a new AWS account? How do I manage my usage costs? How do I get support? How do I use IAM? So while many of us might look at that and say, that's really easy, I solved that problem 5 years ago, the reality is a lot of people are still just getting started, and this introductory content is sometimes the most highly trafficked, the most valuable. So when you're thinking about kinds of content that you might want to create, certainly think about those advanced brand new services, but also think at the introductory level. And they create the same content in both English and Vietnamese. So in addition to learning about the service, they're improving their skills in other languages. They're improving their AWS skills. They are learning to be content creators, content authors. I think this is a wonderful example of sometimes you do something once and you can get value from that in more than one way. All right, now, I don't know if you know the country of Nepal, but it's a developing economy. It is considered one of the poorest countries in the world, and only 0.5% of the women in Nepal are currently employed in the tech sector. So there's currently what's called a gender gap. Now, these women do work. 81% of them contribute to the economy. We had a user group leader in Nepal decide to say, let's see if we can improve on that 0.5%. How can we make that better? And they created a mentorship program called She Can, with the thinking of bridging this gap in tech. They, in addition to working independently, they reached out to AWS and said, we need some female leaders as role models and as mentors. And we want to encourage careers in tech. We want to drive these young women to be able to earn some AWS certifications with the idea that they can then get tech jobs, have really strong, healthy, prosperous careers in tech. The first iteration of this program, they were able to mentor 40 women. And this is all part of the AWS user group in Nepal. Our community leader there, she just actually stepped down to work on her next project. Her name is Barsha Bandari. She was the first AWS community builder in Japan. And the program that Barsha created is called Shikan. And initially, they started very small. Nepal is divided into 7 different provinces. And they said, let's just identify 7 people, 7 young women. Let's get them mentored directly from some AWS experts, with the idea of helping them to get some certifications. And they started with a 4-month program with 2 or 3 study sessions per week and a guest lecture. These small efforts, when you say, okay, 7 people, does that matter? It matters a lot to those 7 people. Is it going to matter to their family, to their descendants, to their community? I believe it will. So while we often do like to think of large scale, can we reach hundreds of people? Can we reach thousands? Changing the lives of 7 people, that's significant. That's a wonderful start. All right, now let's go to Korea. Now this is a problem often faced by user groups. The first generation community is very strong. They form the community, they get everyone to show up, they get the speakers, everything is wonderful for a while. But at a certain point, it's a lot of work running a user group. And there can be challenges of getting new members, of getting new leadership over time. It's so important to have a long-running, healthy community that the current leaders are identifying and nurturing the next generation of leaders and making sure that there's a point when the current generation turns to the next generation and says, now it's your turn. This is something that we saw happen very successfully in Korea. The AWS Korean user group was a student-run group, 100% run by students. The model of this, because it's student-run, the students are going to enter, they're going to participate, they're going to graduate, then they're going to move on, probably join another community somewhere else in the world. So there's this continuous flow of new members in and out. To have some continuity, they've done things like creating an online code repository. They've got both code and content. And they think about this as bridging the generations, where they're making sure that there's effectively a long-term plan in place for their user group to make sure that the work of running that user group is passed along from student generation to generation. Okay, let's turn our attention to Japan. I'd love to have Ms. Hayakawa come up and tell us about activities here in Japan.
Thank you, Jeff. 私からは日本の事例を2つご紹介させていただきます。1つ目は社内コミュニティの事例です。NRI では8年以上前から AWS の社内の勉強会を毎週続けています。もともとはクラウドを専門に扱う部署が始めた小さな勉強会でしたが、自発的、継続的にスキルアップをしたいと考えているエンジニアたちによって維持されてきました。その勉強会の参加者には、ここにいるJAWSDAYSのメンバーもたくさんいて、社外のコミュニティに参加する良さ、メリットを社内のメンバーにも共有してくれています。そういう情報が勉強会や社内のコミュニケーションツールを通じて自然に耳に入る状況が出来上がっていて、社員が興味を持つきっかけが生まれ、社内だけではなく社外コミュニティに参加するようなメンバーが自然と出てくるような状態になっています。 社内コミュニティをきっかけにしてそういった社外コミュニティに参加するようになって、そこでスキルアップをしてきたメンバーは今度は自分が他の人にそういった機会を提供してあげようと、社内のコミュニティの運営を通じて組織全体のスキルアップに貢献してくれています。新しいメンバーが運営に加わることで新しい部署とのつながりも生まれ、今では複数の本部をまたいだ活動にまで成長しています。しかし社外のコミュニティの良さをお伝えしたとしても、なかなか社外コミュニティに参加できない社員もいると思います。 KDDI さんでは社員が社外のコミュニティに参加しに行くだけではなくて、社外の価値観を持っている人を社内のコミュニティに連れてくることで外の価値観を社内に持ってくるという試みを行っています。 KDDI のコミュニティ文化は技術者同士を人と人とのネットワーキングをつなぐためのテックイン、テックオンという2つのコミュニティから始まりました。テックオンは社外の技術者とつながる場としての機能、テックインは社内のコミュニティ文化醸成を技術をテーマに牽引するという機能を担っていました。コミュニティ文化が醸成することで外の文化と触れ合い、外の物差しで中を見れるようになること、好きなことで輝ける場所を作るように、好きなことで輝ける場所を作ることの2つの目的を達成しようとして作られたコミュニティでした。これらのコミュニティをきっかけに社内にコミュニティ文化が醸成され、今ではたくさんのコミュニティが自発的に活動するようになったそうです。この2つの日本の事例では共に社外コミュニティが組織に良い影響を与えていることが分かります。社外コミュニティに参加しているメンバーは会社の枠を超えた人間関係を構築することができます。つまり社外へリープビヨンドしているわけです。そういった人材は同一企業に所属し続けていたとしても外の世界の価値観を身につけることができます。つまり社外コミュニティに社員が参加することで社員に多様な視点を持つ社員を生み出すことができるということです。このような視点を持つ社員が社内に増えることで新しいアイディアが生まれやすくなり、その先の新規事業やイノベーションが生まれるチャンスも増えることになります。私からは日本の事例を紹介させていただきました。Thank you for listening. I'll give it back to Jeff.
Thank you so much. 1 minute. I have some presents for you too. I have additional AWS stickers, classic stickers for you. There you go. Okay, that was really interesting to hear that story. Thank you so much. All right, now my last one was done within our collection of AWS community builders. So I've noticed as someone who does a lot of speaking, unfortunately the world kind of separates itself into two groups. There's like the speakers and not the speakers, and everyone who doesn't speak thinks that those of us who do, that we're like a different kind of person or a different species or something. That is not actually the case. We just actually are people that get up and we speak. There's nothing different or special about us, okay? And some people think, well, I'm just not a speaker, so I can never be a speaker. But the community needs more voices. It needs to hear from more people. So the community builders decided, let's make it easier for people to get some speaking experience. I know that for a lot of people, the idea of getting up and speaking like this is a little bit scary. And the way I like to think about it is you're simply sharing what you know, but you happen to be standing up instead of sitting down. Now that's kind of the little story I tell myself to be very comfortable as a speaker. But honestly, once you have an interesting subject, you're just getting up and talking about it. So our community builders created something they call the open mic night. The idea was give these potential speakers an opportunity to speak in a very non-threatening, a very friendly environment. Now of course, this is totally a friendly environment as well. But the idea is help these speakers get some confidence, get some experience, and to do something. They would make them short talks, which we sometimes call the lightning talks. So they could share something that was cool or impactful. Perhaps it was a new best practice. And the idea was generally get them to present for a global audience in English. This has worked really, really well. So far, I think there have been 27 separate events, including three from Japan. And you can see that people who had never before thought of themselves as speakers are now actually getting that confidence and that experience so that they can do it. So I would challenge you all that if you've never been up in front of an audience and you're thinking, could I be a speaker? You probably can be a speaker. So find that speaking opportunity perhaps at a future JAWS event. So I would say this is a wonderful challenge for you. You can embrace this program, create a way for people to give their 5-minute lightning talks. Use this at your local meetups to start, and use this to build up that next generation of speakers. Let's talk just a little bit as I wrap up about the past and the future of JAWS. If I kind of rewind in my thoughts a little bit, I can still remember being there at that first JAWS event in 2010. I remember speaking. I also remember being very, very jet lagged and standing in front of the audience, almost not able to stay awake. I was so jet lagged at the time. Despite that, it was a very successful event. Since then, we've seen summits, both the JAWS summits and the AWS summits. During the pandemic, we saw the JAWSDAYS online, which I think I participated in at least 2 of those. I remember streaming those from my home. And today, we've got over 1,000 of you here, which I think is just awesome. It's so good to see you. And I really think that you've got a very bright future ahead of you. The interesting thing about AWS is that it's not got a long history, right? We started in 2006, so we're 17, 18 years in. But we continue to launch new services. We continue to expand our regions to new parts of the world. We continue to go into new areas. You've probably seen some of the launches that we did at reInvent, everything from instance types to additions to current services to brand new AI services. So it might be too easy to kind of look at the past and say, well, all the exciting things have already happened. But my sense, having been part of this for so long, there's even more excitement in the future than in the past. And I think JAWS has this amazing opportunity to be part of it. So you all here, you're the ones who get to define and to create that future. Okay, and I have a final challenge for you. I love the idea of taking selfies. And in fact, I want a selfie with the front of the audience here. Well, one right here. We're going to do one there, one over there, and one there. Okay, now I've got some. This is such a fun kind of a thing to do, and I love after any of these events just to see how many different smiling faces we got to see in each events. So my colleagues were actually kind enough to make a bunch of brand new, fresh Jeff stickers, and let's take some pictures together. I will want to see if we can manage to get a picture with every person here today. If we can make that happen, that would be super, super fun to do. Now, remember, I don't measure my job by any kind of numeric success. I measure by like connecting with people and getting to meet you. And that's what I hope we can do for the rest of today. Don't let me get in the way of course, you're attending all of the wonderful sessions, but let's say hi, let's chat, and would love to meet all of you. So with that, I sure hope that you have an incredible day, and let's make this JAWS Day an amazing success. Thank you so much. Great. Thank you.